Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to East Devon District Council's Audit and Governance Committee on the 27th of January 2025. I'm your chair, Councillor Chris Burrup. I would like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via live streaming. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We'll now start. Before we go to that, just a point of housekeeping, just to advise we're not expecting a fire alarm test, so if the fire alarm is to sound, please follow the green signs and evacuate the building to the car park as directed. Thank you. So we'll start the meeting by doing a roll call and declaration of interests of committee members here present, please.
Thank you, Chair. As I call out your names, councillors, if you can just say if you're present and if you have a declaration. So starting with yourself, Chair, Councillor Burrup.
Present and no declarations. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Barlow.
Present, no declarations that I know of.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Goodman.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Bloxham.
Present and no declarations, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Present and no declarations.
That's it, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll start the business with... Oh.
How could I miss? Councillor Levine. I know, never.
I'm here, but I'm not interesting.
Okay, thank you.
With the chair's apologies, Yehudi. We will move on to agenda item 1, which is minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has a comment on the sets of minutes from the 27th of November 2024, please do this by raising your hand. If I have no hands raised, I will take this as an indication that you all agree the minutes of the previous meeting are a true and fair record. Everyone happy with that? Can we have a proposer for that, please? Yep. Pick one. Pick Councillor Goodman and a seconder. Councillor Barlow. All those in favour? And any against? Any abstentions? One abstention.
Actually, I should, because I wasn't here.
2 abstentions, please. Yeah. Okay, that's largely carried. Thank you. So the minutes of the previous meeting are recommended to be agreed. Agenda item 2, we have apologies. It says here Paul Hayward.
Yes, that's the only one I've got.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3, we've done the declarations of interest, so we'll move on to agenda item 4. I'm presuming we have no public speakers registered, so we'll move on to agenda item 5. Late items or matters of urgency, I have none. Agenda item 6, confidential or exempt items, I have none. This won't take long at this rate. Agenda item 7, risk project update, and we have a report from Joanne Avery, Management Information Officer. Over to you, Joanne.
Thank you very much. So just a bit of an update for you all. Again, I hope I won't prolong proceedings either. So just an update on where we are with regards to some of the risk work that we've been undertaking. So we've held some really interesting workshops led by Carl Ducky from Gallagher Bassett, which the directors, each of the directors and their assistant directors attended and worked through thinking about the directors, thinking about what their directorates do, what they're trying to achieve, and what are the risks to them. And just trying to think around the risks for each of the directorates, but in terms of their operational risks. So you can see I've provided an example of some of that work with the finance output. I now have outputs for all of the directorates now, looking in a very similar way. And this work was really quite useful, not just in terms of risk, but also it helped with our directorate plans, giving some focus there about what the directorates each want to achieve and feeding into that process as well. So I think that was really helpful. We were due to have a strategic risk workshop in end of November. Unfortunately, that had to be postponed and is now happening later this week. So I think that's going to be a really interesting session for us to see how that goes. You know, for ELT to come together and really consider corporate risk as we move forward. On the corporate risk register, I have provided you with the sort of current up-to-date risk register as it is at the moment, corporate risk register as it is at the moment. That doesn't include the operational risks at this point because that's work that is still ongoing, but we'll be able to present to you hopefully at the next committee that you can see the operational risks as well. I suppose the other thing that I should mention as well is that this work is all part of the wider risk, performance and risk system, the new introduction of that system. This work will feed into that, and so although I'm presenting you with the current risk register in what was an Excel spreadsheet, we will be moving towards this new system, and there'll be new reports, and it'll be really, you know, it'll be really interesting to see and have your feedback on the reports that come from that system and how we move it all forward. So that's work ongoing and heading your way, as it were. And we hope that the plan is that we have that in place for the new financial year in terms of our reporting of corporate and operational risks. But if you've got any questions or queries to the report that I'm presenting, then please do shout. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. That's great. Any questions from the committee or outside the committee first? Okay, within the committee, Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Libby. I just was looking at item 4. You're putting in a new performance and risk system in phase, and it's going to be in place by April. Will it be sort of tested and ready to go by April? I mean, I'm hoping this doesn't mean it will be installed on the 31st of March and we'll be crossing our fingers and hoping it's working on the 1st of April, because it doesn't work that way, does it? So you've got to get the system installed, tested, sort of run through and made sure that it's actually all going to do what it's meant to do when we go live with it. So is that the case? You're nodding away, so I'm guessing it is.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got a project plan in place, and we shall be having. I've got a list of super users throughout the council, which the supply have got, and they will be undertaking some training at the start of March, and then they'll be doing the user acceptance testing through March as well. So it's quite a short window of user acceptance testing, but we've been assured that what has been assigned to them will be enough, and that yes, so hopefully for the beginning of or within April, we shall have a system that will be built for us. But obviously, with this system that we're going through in phase, it's very you know, we can make it our own, so we can modify it as we go as well. But obviously, that's all part of the training and the implementation of the system. We are having a representative come down from the company in March time, and I think she wants to hold some road shows for staff and I assume as well councillors, if you want to come and have a look. Yes, so I think it'll be exciting times. Certainly through March, it will be really ramping up for training and things for us then. That makes sense, yeah?
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Yes, Councillor.
I just wonder whether would it be appropriate to ask for at some point a really high level overview for this committee of what you're capturing, what this data is going to be able to show us, because it will help us when we're, you know, asking questions to sort of just have a general idea of, you know, what realistically is the sort of value that we'll be getting from this system, and what we can ask for.
With you, Jo.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be really useful. Not just about risk, but performance as well. So I think there's a lot of, you know, there's a couple of the modules that you're actually going to be really interested to have a look at. And as you say, then you know what you can ask us as well, don't you? And what is available to report on. So I think that two-way conversation will be really useful. So yes, I would be very keen to see that happen.
So to that end, I'd like to propose, actually, with your agreement, that given that this is a new system that's being introduced in April, maybe in June, July, if we've got an A&G around about that time, we go on the agenda as sort of like how's it going type of update, and also at the same time we can capture Charlotte's point at that point and have a high level review of what it's intended to do and what the key risks are. Is that okay? Yeah. Would that be all right, Jo?
Yeah, that would be great. And actually that gives us time to have a little play as well. So before we bring it to yourselves and show you what the system is doing and how we're using it. Yeah, more than happy to do that.
Great. Councillor Goodman.
Forgive me, my back, if I turn around, then it won't. I just got 2 or 3 things. On the main document, the risk document, it doesn't show the scale. Should we have the scale at the top so people know what's a low risk, what the impact is, etc., to give those risks?
Yeah.
Please.
Yep.
On your workshop, you talk about, flooding and the concern of flooding. How much is it, the flooding, associated with Devon County compared to East Devon? And I just wonder if there should be a split. The next point would be on the corporate risk 3, climate change. One thing we are improving is the template that now goes to all reports, where people are now having to put in there how climate change affects their paper. And I know we're building on that, but I think that is something now is a mitigation and will improve that. The last point is, on the council plan, the link goes back to 2021, 2023, not the new council plan. And with that, I have to say, you've got it with all your mitigation that it's a green rating. I think you're very ambitious. And I think in 2 years' time to achieve all that we're saying, and we all said when we set that it was going to be a really challenging local plan. And I'm not being critical of the plan one jot. I just wonder whether or not it will be, it should be a green risk, a yellow risk rather than a green risk. Thank you.
Did you get all that, Jo?
Yes, thank you.
I didn't want to come back 4 times.
No, thank you for those points. And certainly when we look at, I shall raise some of those issues in terms of the senior officers around the mitigations. And what I would say about the council plan, just picking up on that point, I think, we do have some work to do at the start of the new financial year at looking at the delivery plan. And that's something that we did say we would do as an organisation, that every year we would look at that delivery plan and check that it's still appropriate, that it's still correct. Certainly in the light of changes that are happening, I think it's right and proper that we do that. And we've got some time aside for ELT to do that first look at it before we then move it on to Cabinet and wherever else it needs to go for approval for changes to the council plan, delivery plan, because you're right, we must make sure that we keep it up to date. It is, it's quite a big delivery plan. And I take your point that whether actually that scoring is high enough at this point. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jo. Any other questions? Okay, we have a proposal, which is, or recommendation, the A&G committee notes the update on the risk project and the committee notes the provided strategic risks update. We have a proposer for that, please. Councillor Yehudi. Marvellous. Go in there first. And seconder? Councillor Goodman. Thank you. All right, all those in favour? That is duly noted. Thank you very much. And thanks again, Joe. And I move on to agenda item 8, which is the strata update on backup and business continuity following the DAP presentation. Is that what it says?
Financial monitoring report, item 9.
No, number 8.
No. Have I skipped one?
You have, yeah. Thank you very much, Chair, Vice Chair. But, yeah. So I think we're over to you, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Robin Barlow. I'm the security manager for Strata. I've been with us for quite a few years. I've read, obviously, the report that DAP did. So DAP effectively do audits for both Strata and for other parties into what we actually do as an organisation, how we support you. One thing I'm very mindful of is that this is a public session, and we've obviously got the video on that. There's information that I need to be careful of because I don't want to give the bad guys and girls any additional information, but I wish to also provide the level of confidence for the committee in terms of what we're delivering against the items that come up on that report. So, but I will cover it at a high level, but by all means, if we want to do something later on, because you've got some very specific points we want to take off the cameras effectively, I can obviously take some questions at that point. So let's just go a little bit over. I appreciate, and we've all got concerns about this thing called cyber and how we respond to that and what might happen, and therefore we need to make sure that if the worst should happen, and so there are 2 points that would come out of this. The first one is about the backups. So that's your ability, in the event of something really horrible happening and the bad guys get in and they do something with the systems here, what do we do about it now that's in that situation? There's a lot of responding we need to do because we've got to get rid of them, etc. out of this. But at the end of the day, we need the council to be able to get back and function correctly. And therefore, we have to have business continuity, so you will find the council officers have got business continuity plans in place to look at this, and we've also got what they call an IT recovery plan on top of that, which is, because IT is a key part of all of this, how do we get the IT bits back so that you can start operating again as you were beforehand? And part of the recovery, the critical bit, is we can rebuild systems, we can rebuild most things, but we cannot rebuild the data of the citizens, of what were they doing yesterday, what were they doing last week, where is this information? And that's where this thing called backups come into the being, because whereas we may not be able to stop the attack, it's just critical to us that we can get the business up and running again. And we back up pretty much all the data. I say pretty much, there's like test systems and things which we wouldn't back up because so we have backups every night of all the data, everything that's happened in the daytime, we take a copy every night of that. We take multiple copies of that. Some go off to the cloud, so that's going off to Microsoft and various other, in this case it's Amazon. I say I'm not going into too much detail, but and some of that we store on our own systems. We've got a hardened system as well, so we've got multiple copies of the data for the council that we can come back to. So we take, a nightly snapshot of everything. On a weekly basis, we then copy some of those to this, what some people might consider old-fashioned tapes. But there's a wonderful thing about tapes, and they've got a term we sometimes see is air gap. We are trying to protect ourselves against, let's call them hackers, there's lots of different terms for them. Often, let's call them China, Russia, wherever they're coming from. What they can't do is they can't get into our location we store our tapes and do anything with those. Those are, I can't think of other way, it's not irrevocable, but it's a very similar word to that. They are consistent at that point in time, and there's nothing you can do unless you burn the building down or something like that. And obviously we store them in fire safes, etc. So in terms of the backups, we have a lot of backups in place. All of the emails, all of the data, something called SharePoint, that's also backed up. And we keep, in a sequence, we keep nightly backups. Those go into our weekly backups. So you get 5 or 7 daily backups. They go into weekly backups. Then you go into monthly backups. And then you go into quarterly backups and yearly backups. So we can go back, not to the, I can't go to the exact day in a year past, but I can see what happens. So should we have something happen, we've got a lot of chances to see what the data was, how it may have changed, and can then bring that back. But the primary bit is most of the backups, we mainly have backups because people make a mess of something, they overwrite something. And so we're constantly having to test the backups because people are doing restores of that data. So in terms of the backup process, we've got a lot of different layers, and that's what you want in backups. You should have 3 copies of everything in different locations. That's just a standard rule of thumb in terms of the security industry. And so we have all this in place. Now, when I looked at the report, I think what's probably happened here is that DAP themselves have changed. So I was working with one individual for quite a while, and a different individual has come in. I think there's just a little bit lost in translation in this point, because this is not a point I was expecting to see in the report. Because actually, when you look at what we're doing compared to maybe other councils as well, we've got a lot of layers in place. Because I'm the one who I actually, because I'm the security manager, backups are the things that worry me, if you want to call it that. I don't sleep well if I have a problem with backups because it's our data. I feel part of the councils. I've come from councils as well. So it is about our data, and I'm really, really keen that we always have the best chance we can to get our systems back. So that's backups, but done at a high level, as you can probably see, because there's a lot more level to that. Is it worth me taking any questions at this point on that point and then go to the second point?
Sure. Thank you. I'll move over to committee or outside, but Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Have we ever done we've been hacked, reboot us, and tested it works?
We have, so it's not quite as simple as that because we have a whole data centre to it. But what we do, so we go through and we have, on a monthly basis, we go through restoring whole systems. So, for example, the environmental health system you might do, or the benefits system. And so you restore that as a complete sequence of everything that makes that up and make sure that operates.
Sorry, have you done that with this council? So have you worked with us that we've shut down our computers, whatever, and you have rebooted it to see that it actually works?
No, and I would never recommend we did that because there's a very, very high risk. That whole operation, it's not that if it doesn't work, you're actually putting yourself at higher risk because of that. Whereas what we do is because of the thoroughness in the process we do in terms of doing the restore checking, so that's us doing the test, and because people need to do restores periods because a system has got a problem, we've never had a failure at restoring those. So I come from a confidence level of that, but actually it's a completely different thing of actually saying, and I appreciate the question because I think we'd all love to do that, but actually there's a very high risk in doing that actual process itself. And so it's a balancing point in trying to find out where should you run the risk at, in effect, compared to the benefit.
Thank you. Yehudi.
Thank you, Chair. In last year, the council's website went down for about 3 or 4 days. And as I remember, in the Strata Scrutiny Committee, we were told that the problem was with the backups. There was a rogue file that the virus killer decided was. What are the risks involved with that? That we're unable to restore the system because some file is recognized as rogue.
Yeah, I mean, and it was, and there's still an ongoing element of that where the virus checker itself, in its own wisdom, thinks a particular file, which is a temporary file on your Mud and Gov system, is a rogue file, and therefore, until we could track down what the cause was, we did do a restore of the system, and because the virus checker still thought it was the wrong file, we brought it back, and of course it still said it didn't stop us restoring the system. It just we had the same error. And it was only then when we went through that and worked with Civica, who are the providers of that system, that we found it's this particular, what they call a signature. And that's back to your balance that we've had the previous thing. There's a balance between security and actually operation. And we trust the antivirus solutions to protect us. But as we found with, and I forgot what the product was, where most of the Microsoft systems went down about, half a year ago in all the airports, you've got that balance between having a security tool doing good and something going wrong with it. And that was all that happened there. The virus checker is a very, very good virus checker. But yes, unfortunately, Modern Gov was the thing that it chose that day was going to be one. But it wasn't malicious. There was nothing there. It's just what sometimes happens when something, in this case, it triggered something which was what we call a false positive. And it was a lot of fun, but difficult. Oh, it's a challenge. You know, you've got to try and work through these things, and it's frustrating, but also when you get there, it's good.
I always worry when IT people say it's a lot of fun. But yeah, okay. Any other questions for Robin on this particular point? Okay, thank you. Robin, is there anything else you want to add in your report?
No, not particularly on this backup bit.
Okay. Do you want to use the mic? Sorry.
It was just about it being cut off from abroad, but is that going to come in the next part?
I'm quite happy to cover it. Do you want to cover this here?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so, yeah, again, I won't use the word fun too much, but we had, and it's Exeter who got impacted, it wasn't actually East Devon. We've had a group aligned with Russia called #NoName, and they've got a lot of other names for themselves as well. And there's some other organisations, copycats in effect out there. And because they're affiliated or whatever, they support the Russian initiatives, etc. They decided to have sometimes it's called hacktivism, there's lots of names for it, but effectively they've tried to impact government websites. Generally that's done to try and reduce the confidence of the public, etc., in the services that we provide. In this particular case, they've undertaken what they call a distributed denial of service. Denial of service is effectively stopping the citizens or us accessing those systems, distributed because it came from about 140 countries. So that was the challenge that not just us, mainly city councils had in the UK, and still having it just after, in the new year, we're still seeing some of the city councils attacked by that same group. So we took the decision that actually the 140 countries is an important part of this. You can't stop these things happening. There is no way you can stop. There were 200 million individual requests to the websites in Exeter. There's none of our systems can handle that load. That's what they're trying to do. They would also go into the search page. So there's lots of things they were doing. So rather than, you can't win it. What you can do is mitigate, manage that risk. If you can reduce the number of countries people come from, they're not going to go, oh, we spotted that East Devon have done this, so let's all come from the UK, because they can't do that. They're coming from around. So it was a simple process and approach over Christmas in particular to say, we don't want any interruption over the Christmas period. There's less people around to actually support that. So we did it for Exeter initially and just said, let's only allow the UK into the site because that immediately manages that risk. And then there was a decision taken that actually the other two councils ought to follow because we don't want one to and the other two taken down. So we're now in a position where that's still in place. But what we're looking for, and I put a change request in this week to look at opening them up, for example, Google searches, not Google, the web searches that it's doing, what they call the web crawlers, to allow those in. We've had Public Eye who do this type of system here. They've had another request in. So we're slowly raising it up at the moment, but these attacks are still ongoing, and therefore it's back to our risk-benefit thing again as to where do we draw that line. And at the moment we're bringing the line up just so that we're keeping control of the situation.
So why do we allow anyone from abroad ever getting into our system?
it's not so much they're getting into the system, it's just because people might be abroad as a citizen, for example, and they want to, because they've got a house abroad, and they wish to get to the East Devon website to see something. I mean, that's the nature, I guess, of this new world we live in, where people just want to expect access from anywhere.
But again, for the few people, risk and reward, why bother? If the risk is there, that we would possibly attack, why should we bother for a handful of people to make their life easier? It won't work till I stop talking, sorry.
No, it's okay. And it's a valid question, and we're not saying as Strata that this is something we need to do. This is something that we have to work with the three councils to understand what is that pain level that we're prepared to accept as a council where people will complain, and try and tune it to that point, and that's where we are at the moment. So the boundary is right still down at the UK level at the moment, plus a couple of others. I say that we got a couple of requests from suppliers saying I need to access the Garmin of one is those from Exeter. For some reason they go to their port there and they get some coordinates or something. I'd never realised that Garmin would be doing that. So we're getting a few of those requests. But from now on, what we're not saying is we're going to go tomorrow, oh, let's just switch this off. What we're now saying is, what can we sensibly do? What are we seeing? Because I can see all the normal traffic coming in, all these different requests, and most of it is good traffic. Most of it, and it's us now trying to understand that, to say, well, these are the things which we think we do need to allow for the business to normally run. And for example, you would want Google normally to be able to go and web crawl your website so that when you do a Google search, it comes back with the East Devon results, because if they can't get to our websites, they can't update all their search information. So it's that balance we're doing, and it's just bringing the type of line up now.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Robin? Robin, just going back to your first point of which was taking on board the what you said about confidentiality. In future, would this item be better discussed in Part B?
Probably. It depends what level, in terms of a committee, you actually want for this. At the high level, as you can see, I can provide enough at this point in time. I'm not giving any state secrets away in terms of what we're doing. We're managing access. You know, many other councils are doing the same. It's just if anybody had an interest. So I think maybe if we go through this again, maybe we'll have a bit more of discussion. Just maybe some bits we'll put into that, and other bits we'll keep in the open then.
Committee happy if we have that approach? Yeah. So actually have it on the agenda have it on the agenda twice. So we'd actually have a Part A element, and then we'd have a Part B element where we could go into it in more detail if we want to. Is that okay?
As you can probably tell, I quite like this whole thing. You know, you know, I'm an IT person. I did lots of different things, and therefore I want the committee to get the confidence in what we've got there, and also I'd be quite keen to discuss some of those things we get in the press about this and that, and some of them they're made up because they get you to sell column inches, etc. So I'm very happy to have those discussions.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your attendance and for your report as well, Robin. It's really appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Move on to there's a recommendation.
There's more.
Just a verb. My apologies. In that case.
There was another bit, Amanda. There was another bit actually, Chair.
Okay. Sorry. If you want to carry on, Robin, then.
That was on off. So the second comment that we had from DAP was it's a challenge actually for any organisation where we're starting to move to this thing called the cloud. And the cloud effectively is storing stuff on somebody else's computers, usually Microsoft's or Amazon systems. And we're doing that, so our email, for example, is stored Microsoft 365. Again, not giving anything away here. Most organisations across the UK will be using Microsoft 365 or Google for their email now. Now, the challenge we get with, and this is one that I think I probably even said to DAP in the first place ages ago, this particular one, we get to a point where we were starting to use the cloud for some of our stuff, but the rest of it is still stored. I'll use my term, but it's a term you'll just hear, called on-premise. So in effect, most of the systems run out of the Exeter data centre. So most of the systems that Joe would be using, for example, those are all coming out. So they're effectively managed by Strata and connected directly from our Strata data center to here. And we've got 2 links and 2 of everything. When you get to the position where some of your stuff is stored up there, and the rest of the stuff is actually operating down here, if you lose the link between the cloud systems and your stuff here, I can now be sitting at this desk. I'm in the council here, but I've got no access to the internet, so I can carry on doing all my normal business with my main business systems, but I can't get to my emails now because they're up there and I've got a link that's broken at that point. So we need to look and be mindful as we move forwards that there is that risk to be managed. And so there's 2 elements to that. Firstly, if we move systems and they migrate up to this cloud, we need to know that the data for the system travels with the system as it goes up there. So that's one of the things, and that's just what we're aware of. For the basic thing where you're trying to access your emails and your SharePoint, so that's some of your files, more and more is now available directly on these laptops. And this laptop, for example, doesn't have to go through the internal systems any longer. So if I needed to in the office, and this is the mitigation. So the risk is I've lost my internet connection. I can't get to my emails and my business system at exactly the same time, but my business processes assume that I've got emails coming in and they goes into that business system. So the mitigation, what do we do about that? And more and more so most offices now have got phones, so that's how you access your emails and you can get to files. You can use those same files because more and more of us have got these laptops. The laptops can talk via the phone, so you don't need an internet connection internally. So because of the way the technology is moving on, there is a risk, and I'm not saying it won't be not noticed at all should that internet connection fail, but the technologies and everything else we've got in place makes it more manageable as time goes on. I will also point out that I talk about the internet connection link failing. We have 2 of everything. So we've got, I won't go too much into, so we've got 2 of everything into different sites. So should a digger, for example, go through site 1's connection, that's a long way away from place 2's connection. And everything is routed in 2. We have 2 connections to this site from everything. So we have a primary and a backup one. So that's the aim, is to not get into that position. But DAP quite rightly raised this out as a potential issue, and therefore that's why they put this comment here, and that's why I've been asked to talk about this, that yes, it can happen, but actually there's a lot of mitigation now in place to stop that happening because of just the technology that's been deployed.
Thank you. Any questions on that aspect for Robin?
No, because I don't want to look stupid.
You won't look stupid, but if you want to chat later on.
We'll leave it at that, Councillor Barlow. Thank you.
Barlow to a Barlow.
Yes. Really appreciate that extended update as well. Thank you, Robin. Thanks. Okay, I'll move on now to agenda item 9, which is Financial Monitoring Report 24-25, month 6 September. So that's a report by John Symes, Finance Manager. John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, so the report on the agenda today is a covering report for the month 6 budget monitoring report that was presented to Cabinet in November. Unfortunately, I think we discussed last time, just because of the timings, this is the most recent published report to bring to you today. So just to very quickly summarise that report. So the year-end forecast position is a favourable position for the General Fund. It's also reporting that HRA is predicted to be on budget for the year, as per the revised HRA budget presented back in July. Within the report, there's variance analysis along with the summary table, but there's also some more explanation within the table, within the report itself. But by way of a further update, we are currently finalising the month 9 budget monitoring position, having undertaken all our monthly meetings, etc. and it's showing a similar overall position for month 9. So the HRA is still forecast to be within that budget as previously agreed. The General Fund, again, is reporting a surplus position. And in terms of the material cost centre variances reported in this report, the month 9 will again be very, very similar. So that's a quick update. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Just a simple question. We're on month 6. You're now working on month 9. What happened to 7 and 8?
John.
Yep, 7 and 8 are completed. All the internal reporting gets completed in terms of reporting to Cabinet. That's the cycle that we follow.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, but sorry. Why can't we see if they've been completed? Why can't we? It's great seeing something in September, but it is a bit out of date.
I appreciate that. We've kind of been through this. The process at the moment, as it stands, and I think this is council protocol, is that the report has to go to Cabinet before it comes to this committee. So we can't see anything in advance of that. Now, we can challenge whether that's right, but actually there have been a couple of Cabinet meetings since the 27th of November. So, it's appropriate for us to ask why or whether, financial reports were presented to those, and if not, why not, I suppose. John or Simon?
So, in terms of committee dates, we report quarterly. Yeah. So, we report quarterly officially to committees. We've already, as John's highlighted, we've already got month 9 going to Cabinet, but unfortunately, how the draft agendas work, 9 wasn't completed in time to hit this agenda, but it's ready to go onto the Cabinet agenda, which is a couple of weeks' time. So we report quarterly officially through to committees, which is seen as good practice. Internally, we've got internal monthly updates and monthly positions, but we don't bring a formal report other than quarterly to the committees. I think it is only down to timing rather than the constitution, but it's perhaps something me and Mel will look at separately.
Okay. Given the nature of what this committee does, it's fair for us to just ask then for a verbal update on what the position is on roughly months 8 and 9 or 7, 8, 9. I mean, are we continuing to be on track? Is the HRA still predicting to be underspent given the extended budget, etc.? I mean, could you give us some assurances on that?
Yeah, I can do, Chair. Yeah, so in that month 9 position, again, the HRA is going to be within budget as the forecast, the forecasting that we're doing. So the same picture as this report. In terms of the General Fund, yeah, it's still a surplus. I don't think it's going to be quite to this level, but it's still a very healthy surplus that's going to be predicted for the month 9 report.
Committee. Councillor Barlow again.
Still a little bit confused about 7 and 8, Chair. I know we talk about 9, but we seem to have lost 7 and 8 somewhere in between. I just wondered on the things that we were concerned about in this report. So development management, public convenient management. We're now 3 months, a quarter of a year further on, and we're saying that we won't get that. We won't understand what's happening until the next meeting. Because it's gone Cabinet. We had a Cabinet meeting in January, so why didn't they get 7 or 8? Okay, you're saying you only do it quarterly. Why do you do it monthly then?
The nature of this committee is it's reported quarterly. So the purpose of this committee is to assure ourselves, that that appropriate controls are in place within the council as a whole. It isn't to run the council. So actually, we need to assure ourselves that the right measures or control measures are in place, they are being correctly scrutinised, and that there are no issues for us to get alarmed about. Not for us as a cabinet would, to understand what the machinations and positions of the financial position of the council is per se at that time. So we've just had a verbal reassurance. And coming back to your first point as to what happened to months 7 and 8, obviously what we're talking about here is a forecast year-end position in every case. So you can almost, I'm not going to say ignore, but 7 and 8 become less relevant than the latest position of month 9, which is the latest forecast position for the year end. So that's why I don't think we're focusing on 7 and 8 at the moment. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, so exactly that. We're just following that quarterly reporting cycle. However, internally, that update is done monthly. It's just that added layer of reporting that, to committee that we're not doing.
Councillor Barlow.
Should we not then move our meetings so that it corresponds, so that we get an up-to-date, rather than dealing with something that, no disrespect, with a verbal update, is, well, in your words, almost irrelevant because it's 3 months out of date?
I think that has been the intention. Yes, Mel.
We're actually considering the timetable in ELT tomorrow for committee meetings for the following municipal year, so we can absolutely look at it in light of that discussion.
It actually reiterates a point that was made probably in the last 2 A&G meetings. So we are, taking it on board. We need to fix the timetable so that it all kind of dovetails together correctly. But we're on with it. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Charlotte.
Yes, it's in relation to point 2.5. The first bullet on there, which is discussing the variation to the general fund position, and it's talking about issues in planning and development, and the mitigation. Basically, it's saying that that not enough planning applications are actually going forwards. We're dealing with more planning applications, but they're lower level, and I presume that's hence less revenue coming in. And the mitigation is to holding off recruiting more staff. And I just wonder if, what I'm not sure I understand the sort of the rationale here, because surely the council should be in a position to enable development as much as possible. And so I just wondered if that could be explained a little bit more. I don't know who I'm
Okay, who would like to have a go at that one?
So what the financial position is highlighting is actually the volume coming through. So basically the income is down, and we're seeing that nationally. So East Devon's not alone in terms of looking at planning income and number of applications, particularly larger applications. The volume is down, so our income is down. That's obviously causing us an issue in our budget. So going back in terms of, okay, how can we mitigate some of that income loss? Working with the service, they had some posts. The volume is down, so the larger applications are down, the more complex ones. So they felt it was a service that they could do without some posts that would help that financial position. So save us some money here because the income is down. In terms of the overall position of should the council be encouraging, yes, in terms of, our economic development team, the growth point team, etc. All of that work's going on, but the planning team sort of sit at the end of that and can only deal with the actual volume coming through at that point in time. Building control we're seeing is down as well. So the economy at the moment, local authorities, if you take a measure in terms of planning applications coming through from development, building control on new properties, is down across the piece nationally. The report's also saying that there are some big ones in the pipeline coming through, but when we get that, if we get that in this year's now looking less likely, will probably come into next year's financial return. So it's just us trying to balance our books over how we can mitigate some of that income loss. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, great. Councillor Barlow.
On that point then, by not having the staff in place when they do come through, are we going to be ready for them, or do we then have to go out and recruit? I think it's a fair comment that you look forward for business. And if you know the business is coming, and we know it is because we've got to build all these houses, we're going through it on strategic planning, etc., are we going to be ready for it then? Or is it then going to cause a bottleneck and a pushback that we're not ready for it because we don't have the staff in place, they don't know the systems, etc., because we're trying to save a couple of quid on this?
Simon.
That's a management call. That's a discussion between, the director, assistant director, myself with the finance hat on, debating all those elements, and that's the conclusion we reached.
It's pretty much a lose-lose situation, isn't it? If volume is down, volume isn't down, but the levels of the applications are down. As an organisation, you're pretty much hands are tied as to what you can do to mitigate that.
Also, didn't they put the rates up? Haven't they just put the rates up in the council so that we're getting more money in anyway for them? And have we taken that into account? I'm sure you have, Simon.
Yeah, no, the rates are built into the current year, the increases, but the numbers are just down.
John, did you want to add something there?
Just to add, in terms of next year's budget, we obviously took that into account when setting the budget. So in terms of the planning fees, there is a reduction in that budget line of £280,000 for next year. Just wanted to add that.
Great.
Thank you.
That's helpful. I mean, 3/4 of the way through the year, it's pretty difficult to sort of change that course so quickly, isn't it? But quite right to reflect it in next year's budget, of course. Okay, if there's any other questions, if there are no others, then our recommendation is to note this report, and we thank John for it. Thank you. All those, do we have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Yehudi, okay, and seconder? Councillor Charlotte, thank you. And all those in favour? And any against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you. I really appreciate your update, gentlemen. Thank you. So we move on to agenda item 10, and through the powers of unbelievable technology, we will hopefully introduce Peter Barber from remotely from Grant Thornton, who's the audit partner for Grant Thornton, and Simon and Peter are going to take us through a verbal update on the 23-24 audit.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check that you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that coming through on the microphone?
Super.
Yeah.
So, good afternoon, committee. Apologies, I'm not able to attend in person today. I do have the small matter of another audit committee later on this afternoon, so the ability to speak to you via the technology is very much appreciated. So this is a verbal update on the position with regard to the 23-24 accounts. A number of you will recall from previous committee meetings, I provided an update on our progress. I think most recently it was at the November committee. I did highlight the increasing risk of us not being able to complete the 23-24 audit due to the council not being able to fully support the audit process. In December, I think despite the best efforts on both sides, it was clear that we were not receiving the responses to many of our audit queries in a timely manner and to the right level of evidence. And I suppose this is against a background where 23-24 was always going to be a really challenging audit for both ourselves and yourselves because the prior 2 years were backstopped and the inability to conclude on those prior years meant that we had to undertake further work in 23-24 at opening balances, so we were increasing the workload, and also because of the backstops we had to reduce materiality, which in turn increases the sample sizes, which further puts pressure on both us and you in terms of the quantum of work and the resource required to discharge our respective roles. And it's probably also fair to say that the council has not gone through a full audit for a number of years. And as ever, the work that we need to do to discharge our role increases in terms of scrutiny and challenge, and that in turn places more pressure on your people to provide more detailed evidence. The other issue I think it's important to highlight, and I did highlight this at the previous meeting, in terms of delivery, I think it was compounded from the council side by the departure of a key member of the finance team. That was 5 weeks into the audit. She had played a key role in the production of the accounts and the working papers, and that really resulted in a further gap in capacity and capability within the team. And given the risk, I've been very keen to ensure that I'm speaking with Simon as finance director, and Chris as chair of audit committee to keep them both abreast of the situation. But despite this, I think we got to the middle of December when we communicated to management that there wasn't sufficient time to complete the audit in the time available. This was based on our experience, our judgment, that it would be highly improbable that we would get the work done by the 28th of February deadline, and therefore we agreed with management that we would prioritise our work in areas that we were most able to complete and provided the most assurance going forward. So the plan now is that we provide a summary report setting out this position, explaining the work that's been undertaken, and I am in the process of drafting that with the team and do hope to get a draft out to management within the next week. It would then be our intention to bring this back to another meeting, which I assume will be a special meeting of this committee, and we probably do need a discussion about when that is, because that would need to take place before the end of February to ensure that you, as those charged with governance, have an opportunity to approve the accounts and for us to present our backstopped audit opinion ahead of that 28th of February deadline. I suppose the only other observation for me is that going forward, we will absolutely, once we get through this, be looking to have a wash-up session with finance to understand what changes need to be made on both sides to see if we can position ourselves to make sure we are in a much better position for 24-25, recognising every year that passes when the accounts aren't signed off is another year where that transparency and accountability is lacking from a financial reporting position. So that is a very quick canter through my summary of where we are. I'm happy to hand over to Simon if that's helpful, or take questions, and I'll leave it with you, Chair, to decide how to proceed.
Thank you, Peter. That's very much appreciated. Simon, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so Peter summed up there. Really disappointed in terms of not having a completed audit for current year 23-24. I think it comes down to a few issues, part on ourselves, the council, but also I think there's reflection for Grant Thornton as part of the discussions that we'll have with them in terms of how we get this right for 24-25. We did lose a key member of staff in terms of the accounts preparation and audit process. Fortunately, they've come back to us again now, so but it's a bit late for the audit. So they're back in post. In terms of structure changes also, so that was, if members remember, when we talked about the sort of pressures on local authorities producing accounts on time, one of the things I reassured you is that we had a position now in the council that was focused purely on this from a qualified accountant's role, would be freed up, do the accounts, has to work with the rest of the team because no one individual can produce the accounts by themselves, but that's their sole responsibility and would also be leading on the audit and be available for audit. Unfortunately, they left just as partway through the audit for another position. They have come back now, they've seen the light of their ways and come back to East Devon, which we're grateful for in terms of her experience and her knowledge. Also, we've got a post that we are hopefully we've offered to in terms of a principal role in the accountancy team, which is another added resource that is responsible for final accounts production. So internally, those two key posts together should give us a lot more resilience going forward. The element, just to put that into context, so the 23-24 is going to be another backstop position. So basically what's that saying is they haven't concluded their audit and they produce a certificate like we had last time that was presented to your committee. We would have never got an unqualified opinion for 23-24 because of the backstop position in prior years, this audit would not been able to give us, with the balances brought forward, an unqualified opinion. Our asset valuations are done every 5 years. They're done in tranches, so they wouldn't have had assurance on those processes. So we would have had an unqualified opinion, but now we're going to have a backstop opinion. So it's disappointing from that point of view, because what it does is leave us in this position for another year. The quicker we can get through the backstop, we would have got an unqualified opinion, but then the following year, hopefully, through the audit, we've got a qualified opinion, a tick if you like. But that prolongs it now for another year. So that is disappointing. The element that I'd like to be reflected on from Grant Thornton, and we can have those discussions. One element we've put in place, so in terms of, we've been promised the working papers requests early, so that when we produce the accounts, we can produce the sheets that we know we need to produce, the evidence we know we need to produce, and at least get that clear up front and done. The second thing is, and I have had conversations with my fellow 151s in Devon, is a lot of us are in the same position in that there used to be a thing called an interim audit. So basically audits were split up into parts of the year. So outside the busy period, we would have an audit take place that would check some of the journal entries, check a number of work, that gives then a position that when you come to do the final accounts, some of those things are already done. I know that's changed, and I accept Grant Thornton and the auditor's view on that in terms of, well, although that work is done, we still have to do it again. So in fact, in terms of efficiency, it's not saving us a lot. But I think there's merit in some of that, because the pain I'm getting for ourselves and from other authorities who use Grant Thornton is that, quite rightly, Grant Thornton are putting the resources into the audit, but they, for example, had 6 people to come in and do the audit. We've got a team of probably 3 or 4 who have got the day job to do at the same time. So there's an intense period that they're expecting, and I understand why they're expecting before Peter comes back, for us to just be on their beck and call 24/7 to answer audit queries, run reports so they can see it live, a number of work. A district council is going to struggle under any circumstance to meet that sort of resource requirement. If we can try and spread out that request over time, and I think we can do it sharing with other authorities because they're feeling the same pain. So whether there's like 2 weeks at East Devon, leave us, 2 weeks at Exeter, leave us, 2 weeks at Teambridge, then it just works better in terms of that request of resources, if you like. But that's just thoughts going forward in terms of how we get this right. But I apologise, I think, in terms of where we are with another backstop year.
Before we go to questions, maybe it would be appropriate for Peter to come back on those particular points about potential for an interim audit. Peter, would you be able to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So in terms of, let me pick up the working paper requirements first. So the working paper requirements, East Devon will not be a fundamentally different organisation in 24-25 to 23-24. So it is very simple for us to furnish you with the working paper requirements, and absolutely receptive to doing that at the earliest opportunity, and absolutely ahead of your close down process. The interim audit discussion is an interesting one because one of the challenges has been in the past is that when will we want to be doing the interim audit? Well, the interim audit cannot start until we've done the planning. External audit is a retrospective exercise. We do come in after the event, and that's how it's always been. So the plan will be informed by our planning work, which involves some input from your officers, predominantly finance officers, and that is underway. It starts in January and sort of January, February, March, when we get the plan together. And until we've done that plan, we aren't in a position to confirm our audit approach, which sets out how we discharge our responsibilities and get our assurance. However, there is possibility to do some interim work. We can make some resource available. The challenge is often we find that when we are available, which is late March, probably the first 2-3 weeks in April, obviously that is peak time for the very individuals that we need to engage with for closing down the accounts themselves, because you close down your accounts after year end of March. You have, interestingly, this year, for 24-25, looking ahead, an extra month. You have until the end of June to produce those accounts, so you have a bit longer. And I think my view would be we are absolutely open to dialogue about what is the art of the possible in terms of our interim audit. Many years ago, we would do month 1 to 9 substantive testing, looking at payroll, some of your main areas of expenditure and income. That often proved complicated, and the only concern would be when you get back in at year end and you get the full year analysis, and then you look at the first 9 months, they don't reconcile with the 9 months you were given at month 9, because there's adjustments going through, and then that potentially can result in that work not being something we can rely on. We have had a number of challenges around reconciliations in 3-4, and therefore I think probably my view, without going into the detail now, would be we need to maybe look at other areas that we would normally do at post statements that we could potentially bring forward. Whether that would have made a massive difference this year in 23-24, I don't think so, but I recognise that every little bit helps, and we need to do whatever is possible to position ourselves as best we can to get the work over the line. We've made a commitment as a firm that we won't be working past the end of December on audits, because invariably once we get to that deadline, it's almost impossible to get the work done. So once again, the resource will be put in to aim to complete ahead of the end of December, and we need to make sure that we are able to get that evidence from you in a timely manner to the right quality standards, so we can tick it through and we don't end up in the position where we're going back and forward seeking further clarification because it's not in the right format with the right level of detail, as it was in many cases this year.
Okay, thank you for that, Peter. Inevitably, it's going to mean we've got to put our heads together well in advance of the forthcoming year end, and start planning pretty much immediately for the 24-25 audit, etc. I think is my conclusion on this. But we are blessed with the presence of our finance portfolio holder, who is also, and I don't mean this by any disrespect to Grant Thornton at all and Peter Barber, but he's also a competitor to Grant Thornton. I was just wondering, Sam, if you wanted to input anything at this stage in terms of process. Is there anything that Bishop Fleming would do differently to the way that this is, to the approach that has been done at the moment by Grant Thornton?
I'm not involved actively in there, so I probably can't comment too much in public on behalf of them.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but okay, all right. I'll take that as a maybe. It's the most positive thing I can do with that. But okay, in case there was. Okay, questions. So go to Sam first, if we can.
Thank you. I just wanted to lean on a comment you made. The areas that are being focused on are those you're able to complete up until the end period. I think one of the concerns I would have in that is for this committee, this council, is probably the preference would actually be those areas that are of highest risk as opposed to those that can be completed, because often the ones that can be completed are because they're simple and of lower risk. Obviously, we've got a backstop. We've got next year, it sounds like the debrief is going to probably decide whether next year is going to be a backstop or a qualified accounts. It's not come up yet, but the reorganisation does mean we're probably going to end up with qualified accounts until whatever the new authority ultimately is. So there is always that to bear in mind in the back, I think, of everyone's mind. And the other bit, just to touch on, and I think, to be fair, I know the answer, but if we're only getting a partial product, especially for next year, if we know what we're doing, should there be a conversation with PSAA around how much we should be paying for 3/4 of an audit, if that's what's ultimately decided can ever actually be done?
Okay, there's quite a lot there to spring on Peter, but yeah, nice one. Peter, over to you for a response if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies because I didn't quite hear all of that, but I think I picked up the general gist, so I will seek to respond as best I can, and no doubt you'll remind me if I've missed anything. So in terms of, just to be clear on the qualification and the impact of that on future years, you're absolutely right. The fact that we've backstopped 21, 22 and 22, 23 and that will now be backstopping 23, 24, there will be a number of years that we need to complete a proper audit on, a full audit on, before that disclaimer is removed from those accounts. And Simon alluded to the reasons for that is because actually by disclaiming and backstopping those audits, it means that prior year figures we don't have any assurance over, and by definition we are then unable for a number of years to gain assurance over the closing balances, given we have uncertainty over the opening balances. So realistically, given amongst other things PPE, property, plant and equipment, you're only required to value your assets at least once every 5 years. Potentially there are a number of years that needs to go through before you could potentially, as a council, end up with a clean opinion. And potentially, doing the maths, it may well be, subject to, I think you alluded to local government reorganisation, subject to how that proceeds. That may mean that you and potentially a number of other councils in similar positions in Devon, and for that matter elsewhere, may end up entering that reorganisation, should it happen, in accordance with the suggested timelines, with those accounts still disclaimed. In terms of risks and high risks, we set out our risks based on our planning work, and I suspect they will be very similar in 24-25, and we absolutely prioritise those areas. So they were, amongst others, property plants and equipment, journals, your IAS 19 pension liability. Those were the main areas of risk. They're very large values, subject to large degree of estimation. We absolutely prioritised those at the very start of the audit. They're very involved areas. We struggled with all of those areas in terms of concluding those, and none of them were concluded at the point of pulling out. We will once again focus on them and prioritise them, and we'll absolutely be focusing on them as part of that discussion with officers. And finally, in terms of fees, as you mentioned, fees are determined by public sector audit appointments. So we will arrive at a fee based on our inputs. We will share that with public sector audit appointments, and it will be for them to determine whether that is an appropriate level of fee. And invariably that involves them looking through our files, looking at what time we've charged, and making an assessment of whether that is appropriate. And whilst we will give you indicative fees, when I present and share with management shortly our brief audit findings report, that will be ultimately subject to PSAA approval in due course.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Peter. Sam, is there anything else that you wanted to come back on that? No? Okay, thank you. I really appreciate a very full answer to that, those questions, Peter. Councillor Barlow.
Right, I'm not an accountant, but you did say that what we do doesn't change, and we're every year we do the same thing. We deliver the same stuff. We have the same departments that need to be inspected, and you have to make a plan. and you say you make your plan in January, February and March. Why does it take so long to make a plan in January, February and March? Why can't you make it before then? Because the plan surely must be pretty much similar to the year before and the year before that and the year before that. So that's a question for you. And the other thing on this member of staff that left, that cost us not doing it this year, and we've taken them back on, I do hope that someone's put in their contract that they better not do it again, because it does seem a little bit ridiculous if it's truly one person that has caused this, and I find it hard to believe that one person could cause all this, but if one person has caused it, why you would take them back on again?
Yeah, I think the second point we have to be a little bit careful with. I mean, there is inevitably a capacity implication to what happened. We need to just bear in mind, you know.
Well, the
we
person,
can't really refer to
I
it.
understand what you're saying, Chair, but the person has been said, this is the reason we have failed, and we are now getting this. And I just, you know, I know we have to be very careful what's said because people aren't here to defend themselves. However, we are, you know, I just do hope that we reflect that it can't happen again.
It would be most inappropriate to apportion the blame to that individual for their actions in this case. You know, that's purely from a personal, career decision that was taken, and nothing. It's not a reflection on the process itself. So, you know, it had an implication and an impact on the process. Of course, it did. It is a rationale for it, but I don't think that can be held against any individual. Okay, so. Yeah, Simon, do you want to add anything? Or
no, that's exactly right. It's individual's choice, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. In terms of the first question about planning, John or Simon, do you want to come back on, you know, the timing of the planning?
I think the question was Grant Thornton's planning, I believe. Is that right, Councillor Barlow?
Well, the gentleman, Peter mentioned it. Yeah, the planning that he had to do between, but he mentioned you were the ones that did the planning with yourself and him. So I thought, so that's what I thought.
So, sorry, Chair. From my point of view, I'm quite happy to start that now, but I don't think that works in terms of your routine or process, Peter.
Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, through you, through you, Chair, if I may. So the work is underway. Planning is underway already. A lot of the planning we can do remotely. We can access information, things like, you know, your budget monitoring and all that sort of stuff from your website and various other sources. So planning is less involved for the council than the post-statements visit or the interim visit for that matter. But it does take time, and it's important that we are able to properly do that. It involves quite a considerable amount of work around business processes and documenting them, walkthroughs, a whole raft of stuff that involve actually some engagement with officers from the finance team. And that invariably does take some time, although absolutely the majority of the work is after the accounts are produced. I do not see that impinging on the ability of the audit to proceed in a timely manner, because there will be opportunity should we want to do it, and should there be capacity within the council, recognising it's the same time as you will be preparing your accounts to do some interim work. And I am comfortable that we will have a plan out to you by March, which is in accordance with how we've done it everywhere, and importantly at other councils where we have signed off the accounts some time ago.
Okay, thank you for that, Peter. Much appreciated. Okay, any other questions? Charlotte first.
I just wanted to say thank you for that update, and how it's disappointing but totally understandable how we've got to this position. And I appreciate that the council and Grant Thornton have both worked very hard to try and get the audit done this year. And I know there was great optimism, and we had every reason to believe in the summer that, you know, that we would make it this year. So it's
it is disappointing, but I think, you've clearly done everything that you could under the circumstances and are putting in place measures to make, give us the best chance of actually getting an audit completed next year. So I just wanted to extend my thanks and I hope that I understand that our auditors are also having to prioritise the councils that are in the best shape to actually complete their audits this year, and that we weren't one of those. But I really hope that that we will be in that cohort next year, and that a sort of a special effort will be made to help the team complete it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Charlotte. Councillor Barlow.
So how close were we? Were we 95% there? Did we miss it by 5%, 10%, 50%? Were we even vaguely close? And I have great respect for the staff and everyone else. However, doing the audit is a pretty important thing, I would have thought, and especially because we haven't had it for 2 years. So, what are we going to do different this year that's going to make it go through? Just having one member of staff, is that going to be it?
Okay.
Or were we only halfway there? Are you, Peter, happy that we have the ability to do it? I don't want to pick on Simon because I know it's his boy, baby, and he has apologised, but it's like, what's going to make it actually happen? If other people can do it, why can't we?
Okay, let's. I think we'll put that to Peter first. So, there's a couple of elements there, a couple of parts of that question, Peter, if you wouldn't mind. So, some sort of assessment as to how close we were, quantitative if possible, and then secondly, what do we think we should be doing differently this year to next, and then maybe move on to Simon to respond.
Yeah. So Chair, in terms of how close we were, we had a period probably from late November through December where very little progress was made. And I would estimate that we were probably by the time, realistically, by the end of December, mid-December, we decided it was unlikely to happen. At that juncture, we were probably about 60% of the way through, 65, maybe 2/3. We did make a further effort once the member of staff returned in January to see whether we could catch up in early January, but a number of the assistant points remained outstanding. That had been outstanding from the outset, that really indicated pretty quickly in January that it wasn't going to happen. I'll be brutally honest. There needs to be a big step up in terms of timely, complete responses to be able to tick them off, because I think there was a huge amount of back and forth this time trying to get the information in the right format. It needs to be right first time. Every council is different. You have complexities compared to many other district councils in you have a HRA, which does make your accounts much more complicated, but there are many councils out there, districts with HRAs that do get their accounts done. Every council is different, but there are lots of commonality and similarities as well. We do recognise that the ability to attract the right people with the right skill set is difficult and challenging. Whether there is any learning, and I've already spoken to Simon about other councils where it may be worthwhile having a discussion with them about what they do in terms of their approach, compare and contrast, and see if there's any learning ahead of the close down period to inform what happens for 24-25.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Peter. Simon.
I think in terms of resources, doubling the number on it in terms of the capacity purely on the statement of accounts will help. I think we're going to have to do a lot more on our planning process. So in terms of the close down timetable, that is very refined. We've been through it many years in terms of what it looks like, all the various tasks that need completing. But I think on reflection, probably the audit side is an area that we're going to have to plan out in equal detail in terms of what's required, and when. And I think also we're going to have to work very closely with Grant Thornton over the date of when the audit starts and how that can really gel with our team and the other requirements on the team that has to happen on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, so that we can almost shut up shop perhaps for a month or two in terms of a lot of the other bits of work, but then that does bring other problems of governance and reporting requirements. So we've really got to sit down, work out the audit timetable in a lot more detail as we would do with the close down timetable, I think is my conclusion. Does that, I'm looking at John as well at the same time. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Okay, great. Great, thanks. Are there any other questions from committee? Yeah, Councillor Goodman.
I've got several, in fact. If you go back a year, I'm sure no one expected us to be in this situation again. And I'm sure both Grant Thornton and Simon's department had every endeavour to make sure we got the audit stuff in time. But the result is we haven't. So I think the learning's got to be, how do we make sure it happens properly this coming year? And what I'd like to see is, once you've decided how we're going to achieve that, we have a copy of what we're going to do differently, because I think that will be the right way we can help you. The next point I think that I'd mention is that I'd like to know, particularly from Peter, two things. Where does that leave us as a council, not actually having the audit completed for the third year running? How many councils outside Devon, broadly speaking, have gone 3 years now without an audit being completed? And I think it's really important that you'll remember that when we spoke last time, we brought this item to full council to inform them. I think it would be right, personally, that Chris brings it to full council as an item so all members understand and what you were going to do about it. Because unless you serve on this committee, let's be frank, most members will probably not read these minutes, but this is really important. This is so important to us to get right. And I think informing them would be the right thing. But you know, I agree with Sharon. Everybody tried to get it done, I'm sure, but we didn't succeed. We must learn and make sure we do it for this coming year. That's all I've got to say. But I'd be really interested. The real key for me is what are the risks to us now that we haven't got the audit done?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Peter, there's a couple of questions there for you, if you could please first.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the questions, Councillor. So, in terms of what does it mean having 3 years audits that have been backstopped, it's not a great place to be in. The accounts are fundamental to the accountability and transparency of the organisation. Also, given financial challenges, not just within East Devon, but across the sector, the importance of a clean opinion where decision makers have confidence that the financial position is true and fair and they are making decisions based on complete and accurate information is absolutely crucial. So I would say that as an auditor, but it is absolutely critical that we return to a position where you are having a full audit done, recognising the wider issue about how long it takes to roll out of that disclaimer. And in terms of your second question about outside of Devon and others with 3 years disclaimed, there are an awful lot of councils out there who have disclaimed audits. There are approximately 500 councils, police, fire authorities, pension funds, local government bodies out there subject to external audits. I can't remember the most up-to-date information, but I know at one point, about 6 months ago, before the backstops were applied to prior years 22, 23 and before, there were close to 1,000 opinions outstanding, so almost averaging 2 a council. That's been caught up now, but there are councils that have 5, 6 years backstopped, but there are many, many councils that have no years backstopped, and the importance is focusing on East Devon and ensuring you get to that position as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate that. Simon, is there anything you want to add?
No, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned, Peter, I think it was you, requests for information and the fact we're not always responding in a timely fashion. I wondered if year on year there's a kind of consistency about the areas or the types of information that we're requesting, and whether it would help to speed the process up if we kind of anticipated that, so we had the information ready to hand, so that process could be kind of speeded up.
Yes, thanks, Peter.
Yeah, through you, Chair, if I may. So there is absolutely learning to be had there, and we will no doubt pick that up in terms of where the council really struggled to provide the right evidence in the right format in a timely manner as part of that wash-up. I think the problem is, and I alluded to this in my introduction, is that obviously, what is there a trend? It's very difficult to look at a trend when we didn't do 21, 22 and 22, 23. So 21, 22 and 22, 23 were backstopped with very little, if any, audit work undertaken. Whereas 23, 24 is different because we had an attempt at doing the full audit. And as I said, we only got part way through it. So we don't know if there wasn't any learning to be had from the prior years, but we will absolutely focus on what the problems were in 23, 24 to inform what needs to change for 24, 25.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Barlow.
Well, I just wonder if there should be a timetable of targets we're going to hit by certain dates, so that we don't wait till November, December and say we missed it.
I think that's a great point, but I'm sure, 100% sure, that we'll get that out of this next planning process. So, respectfully, I would suggest that we put the 24-25 audit on the agenda for March's meeting, so that actually we are keeping on top of this and looking at plans at that stage. We're going to have to schedule a special meeting in February. Well, we'll be in discussion with Peter about availability and the timing of that, but be on the lookout for that in order for us to sign out. Are you in Thailand again, Councillor Barlow? No. Okay, fine. Keep an eye open for that, because we will need to sign off the qualified accounts, or the backstopped accounts rather, for 23-24. So there are a number of actions that are coming out of this, but yes, a detailed plan, I'm sure, will be high up there. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Goodman.
Come back, and I do think it's important, and I think you would agree that it should go to full council to update them. Then I'm thinking to myself, should that come sooner rather than later, or should it come when the new plan is put to us and we've agreed it and we know we're working to get it right? I'm just wondering which way to do that.
My personal view is there's a full council meeting in February. I think it should be declared in February that this is going to be the case. That's my personal view. Any other questions? Okay, well, listen, I'd like to really show my appreciation to Peter for joining from through the powers of technology from afar, and wish him well with yet another audit committee meeting that he's got to attend. An unenviable task in truth, and thanks to everybody for a full and wide-ranging discussion. But we need to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much, Peter. So the next item on the agenda is SWAP audit plan for 25-26. We don't have a representative from SWAP here, but it was really to highlight that SWAP are in the process of putting their audit plan together for 25-26. Lisa Fry did circulate to all members of the committee an invitation, basically, to try and draw out people's suggestions for what we would like to see on their forward plan. That's going to be firmed up in the coming weeks, so I would urge people, please, to go back to that email, respond accordingly, and or forever hold your peace, pretty much. And I'm not looking at anybody in particular. So that's really what that item is, I think, unless anybody else wishes to comment on it. Okay. And in that case, we move on to audit and governance forward plan. So that's agenda item 12. And the forward plan, I think, has been forwarded as part of the agenda. Have we got any comments or questions on that? Councillor Barlow.
Well, just about what we've just been talking about. I can see that there's an audit committee update, but is that enough, or should we have the working plan put in there on everyone so that we get an update from every single one on it, where we are, what percentage we should be at, and what percentage we're at, if that's possible. As I said, I'm not an accountant, I don't understand it, but audit and governance seems to be to do with that.
Simon, would you be happy for us to include it as a standing item quarterly going forward on this committee?
Even if it's just verbal, Chair, we don't need it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We'll need a meeting in February in order to get the accounts approved by this committee. And then we can move into the standard format in March in terms of reporting. And then at least Grant Thornton will also bring to you their audit plan, which will then give you the timescales for their actual audits as well, so we can match that up against our monitoring process.
Yeah, no, very good point. We also talked about Joanne's risk management system update as well in June or July, that sort of time frame, if you recall from the earlier agenda item. So if we can include that in the forward plan as well, please. But anything else that springs to mind? Yes, Mike.
Just the training, we've got 2 training sessions there. Are they going to take place on the 20th of March? It says March 2005, Treasury Management and Financial Management and Statement. Is that
I think they are scheduled. I think that they will coincide with the March A&G meeting, I'm sure.
So we would do training like we have today.
And on that note, I'd like to formally express my thanks to the people who conducted today's training on corporate corporate risk and fraud. I thought it was excellent, really informative, and very useful. I was blown away by some of the findings, so it's great.
Really good.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then that brings our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everyone for taking part and wish you a safe journey home. Thank you very much.